Good evening, everyone. I will now call our May 14th, 2024 regular meeting of the Board of Directors to order. Thank you to those attending in person tonight and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later date. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on the table and turn it in to Board Secretary Kim Colvin, seated at the end of the table on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. And before we move into tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment and introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Degner, Directors Abraham, Eastham, and Williams. To my left, Vice President Clausen, Directors Finch, Lingo, and Board Secretary Colvin. And with that, we will dive into tonight's agenda with first up is our student representative updates for the last time this year. And before our students come up to the podium, just a sincere thank you from the board. And we just chipped in and got you a small thank you gift that Board Secretary Colvin will hand to you as you come up to the podium. First up, we have City High, Lulu and Rose.
Hello, you all. It's Lulu.
And Rose. And we prepared a poem for you guys tonight since it's the last school board meeting.
Okay. First, you go.
Oh, I go?
No,
you go.
Oh,
You go.
yeah. Dear school board,
We've known you for so long.
it's so sad we're soon to be gone.
Don't forget me. I beg.
I remember you said,
Sometimes it lasts in love.
and sometimes it hurts instead.
Sometimes it lasts in love. But
sometimes it hurts instead. Ooh, yeah. Never mind, I'll find someone like you. I wish nothing but the best for you too. Sorry.
Moving on.
Good.
A few weeks ago, City High held its second Culture Day.
Yes. It was an all-day event.
Yes.
And we had how many? 50 students this time compared to how many last year?
We had 50 students just for the fashion show this year, and last year we had, I think, a little less than 20.
Yeah.
So big update.
Prom was it last weekend? Or 2 weekends ago? 2 weekends ago.
It happened.
It happened. And it went really well. We sold the most tickets before a day before prom that we've ever sold. We sold 600 before everyone buys them last minute. And we were like, oh my God. So it was the most we've ever sold. So that went really well.
Yeah. Yesterday we also had our last paper day, so the Little Hawk, the newest issue, is officially out.
Track season's coming to an end soon, and we sent some of our
Oh.
we're kids too. The track athletes to Drake Relays, which was really fun.
The last choir concert is also happening tonight, so you guys are all welcome to come.
Yeah.
I actually don't know when it is.
7.
7.
That won't happen.
Yeah, so never mind.
AP tests are wrapping up. I had my AP Lang test today,
Yeah.
and I think it went really well. But yeah, I really appreciate the digital model. I'm enjoying it.
Spring sports are also wrapping up. We just came back from our friend's soccer game, so yeah, last one of the year.
Yeah. Film Fest is next week, and that's our student film premiere, and it's always super fun. 100% recommend. Like, it's run by the art room. It's just a really fun event.
You should say the elementary.
Okay. Elementary walkthrough also is a tradition City High started last year, and we're doing again this year, where seniors walk through their old elementary schools on the last day of school with signs on, like, inspirational, what they're doing, where they're going, talk to classrooms. So I'm excited to do that again this year.
The Senior Salute will also be out soon. It's the senior magazine, which the seniors all work on, and I'm so excited for it because I worked on it for too long. But yeah, superlatives are also there. So
I won worst driver, so I would watch out in the parking lot after this. But yeah, thank you.
And then the last thing is thank you guys.
Yeah.
From the school that leads.
Thank you, Lulu.
Yeah. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so much. Don't forget your gift. Liberty High student reps were unable to make it tonight, so next we'll move to Tate High. Evan? Is Evan here? Okay, then West High Cindy.
Hi, everybody. I know I can't top that awesome poem, but I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for listening to me and just greeting me with open arms. I really appreciate it. So to start off, we had track. Aiden Jacobson, a senior at West, was named the most outstanding performer at Drake Relays, and this is huge. He won the 400-meter hurdles and also was part of the distance medley that also won, so congrats to them. And we also had a numerous amount of state qualifiers, which we had our state qualifiers at City on Thursday. So that was really exciting. The soccer girls team just played last night across town rivals, and the boys competition got moved to tomorrow, so we'll be interested to see how that goes. The tennis team had lots of individual qualifiers from both the girls and the boys team. Moving on to prom, we had prom a couple weeks ago. It was super fun, but I think my favorite part was the after party prom, and a bunch of parents worked on that, and we stayed after school. We went to there after prom, and it was super safe, and we had raffles, and it was just nice to see everybody, so that was super cool. We have a bunch of kids out of town right now. We have 4 kids that are in LA currently. They're competing in this international science fair thing, so it's insane what they're doing. And then we also have Andrew Dong, which he was selected 1 out of 161, so there's only 2 in the state of Iowa selected for Presidential Scholar, so that's also really cool and want to congratulate him. We have 2 debate kids that competed at the national tournament, and so that was really cool. And for our newspaper, we had Designer of the Year, Aaron Varga, and Photographer of the Year, Gianna Liu. So that was super awesome, and I just wanted to say huge congrats to them. And on April 12th, we had a Red Cross blood drive, so that was really cool to see. A lot of people came and donated blood. I couldn't because I had a track meet the next day, but yeah, that was super cool. And we also had a multicultural fashion show. We call it Walk It Out at West. We had a bunch of different cultures come, and we also had a potluck. That was really good. And yeah, that was it. I just wanted to say thank you guys again for last time.
Great. Again, thank you so much, students, for coming and spending time with us throughout the year. I definitely appreciate it, and I know other directors did, but I'll allow them to thank you themselves if they wanted to. No?
Thank you for providing me laughter.
Always the highlight of our meeting. Thank you so much.
Next up, we have the ICEA update from President Brady Shutt.
Thank you. Brady Shutt on behalf of the Iowa City Education Association, President Malone, Vice President Clausen, Director, Superintendent Degner. I'd like to just second that and also thank the board for not making me go right after Lulu and Rose tonight. I do appreciate that. But congratulations to all of the school board reps. You're fantastic representatives of the student body for your school, also for the entire district. I know that I speak on behalf of all of us by saying that we're just incredibly proud of who you are as people and all that you've accomplished, and we wish you the very best, moving forward. So we also have, ICEA has annual scholarships that it awards, and we have a very deep applicant pool that represents just the amazing student body that we have here in the district. We had 5 winners this year who received a $1,000 scholarship for their outstanding academic and extracurricular performances, as well as their community service. Those are Eleanor Whites, Andrew Hawk, Cale Kurtz, Heath Lane, and Jacob Curies. Were the 5 winners this year. And that we just have tremendous young people here in the district. We get to recognize these folks as seniors, but I'm always mindful of all the people along the way that they've been able to work with and that have had the opportunity to shape the people that they are. Finally, May is School Board Appreciation Month, and IASB's motto, I found, which hopefully you know, is propelling students to new heights. And I want to, on behalf of ICEA, extend a sincere thank you for all of the considerable time and energies and talent that you put into this role. I think we could all agree, seeing their students here and hearing about some of the winners, that we are, in fact, as a district, propelling students to new heights, and that's really a direct result of your leadership. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you plan to speak. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker and 5 minutes for speakers who have the assistance of an interpreter. Speaker's time limit will be displayed on the screen above Board Secretary Ms. Colvin. The community comment period shall not be limited to ensure, ignore that part. Community comment will be limited to an hour. All other comment will take place at the end of the meeting as needed. Any individual, The board will not engage in any discussion during community comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by these rules or otherwise disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave and/or referred to law enforcement. And as a reminder, for those wanting to make a community comment, there's a form out in the lobby. Please fill it out and hand it to Board Secretary Kim Colvin at the end of the table. So our community comment tonight is Billy Townsend.
Good evening. Billy Townsend, 713 Whiting Avenue, Iowa City. I've had children and grandchildren here in the district, and I thought that our teachers were to educate our children, not to be policemen. I'm really happy to hear, or I'm hoping I'm happy to hear, that the board is going to opt out of the security guards and having our teachers armed in the schools. After reading about the bill, the thing that struck me more than that is that the bill would give qualified immunity to armed school staff with professional permits, protecting them from civil lawsuits or criminal prosecution if they used reasonable force and acted within the course of their duties. Opponents have argued that exempting armed school employees and the districts themselves from lawsuits will leave families with no option to receive compensation if their loved one is shot at school. That's so frightening to me that my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren would have to be in school and have their teacher or their principal shoot them. So I'm hoping that the district will opt out of that bill. Thank you.
Royce Porter, and I would just like to know that Billy spoke on behalf of the Black Voices Project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Vivian Quadro. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Please correct me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Viana Kadura. Let me start by the quick search that I did before I came here. If you go to the District Destiny Library Catalog, you go to, for example, Northwest School, you search type Israel, you have 7 to 10 books related to Israel. You search Palestine, there are 6 of them. Only one of them relates from the side of the Palestinian story. The other one either biblical or politically against the Palestinians. You search Holocaust, 74 books available. You search about Nakba, which is a catastrophic day for the Palestinians, equivalent to the Holocaust, 0. You search for occupation of Palestine or Palestine, nothing relates to it. You go to West High School. You search Palestine, only 3 pops up, 2 of them like logical, the other one's not. You search Israel, 13 of them. You search about Holocaust, 50 of them. You search about Nakba, the occupation of Palestine, 0. I did see a search even in the elementary level. you barely find anything about Palestine and Palestinians. You find about Israel only. Tomorrow marks the 76 years of resilience, 76 years of suffering, of barbaric atrocities, of genocidal destruction, 76 years of horrific mass expulsions of the Palestinians from their homeland. This is an emotional topic because I am Palestinian. 76 years since the deliberate act of establishing an illegitimate state to house the Holocaust survivors. The Palestinians' Nakba, or catastrophe, has resulted in expelling more than 75,000 to around 1 million Palestinians, and even driven away more than 350,000 Palestinians. We witnessed several mass killings and massacres. More than 400 cities and towns were ethnic cleansed and wiped off the map. It resulted more than 8 million of refugees right now around the world. The Nakba had profound impact on the Palestinian people who lost their homes, land, and way of living. It remains deeply traumatic event in their collective memory and continues to shape their struggle for justice and for their rights to return to their homelands. While the political Zionist project fulfilled its dreams of creating the Jewish homeland in Palestine in 1948, the process of the ethnic cleansing and displacement of Palestinians never stopped. Today's genocide in Gaza, still taking place right now at this moment, is a continuation of that Nakba. The Nakba and the Holocaust are both considered cultural traumas and are central to the collective memory and the identity of the two people. Ethically, politically, logically, especially within an educational institution that claims inclusivity and care towards all the students without any biases or discriminations, you cannot justify and acknowledge one over another. Especially when it is a fact that our country and government are the ones who are funding the continuation of the Nakba till this moment, leading to the killing of 40,000 people in a span only of few months. This topic was addressed with the school district through the diversity and cultural responsiveness team before, and a request was made to acknowledge this day with a quarterly newsletter. And a response was received through an email on January 17 that will be included, but it wasn't included. You cannot have selective empathy, not then, not now. Palestinians are people with universal aspirations for freedom, liberation, and self-determination, but you chose not to hear us or see us because you have deemed us unworthy based on the dominant narrative of the Western world. It seems nothing that we say or experience matters to you. You have chosen to take political sides on many occasions. You have lowered your flags for the lost souls of the colonizers and clearly continuing to deem us, in our case, and our students are as insignificant to you. We had hopes, we had expected more of the Iowa School District, but you have failed us again. Please, I do ask you to correct this narrative and to bring back the humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the agenda approval for tonight's board agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Board Secretary Coleman, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yay vote, Kim.
Thank you, Director Clausen.
I am also.
Thank you, Director Irving. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Before we get to tonight's consent agenda, were there any questions regarding the bills from directors who reviewed them? Hearing none, are there any items from the consent agenda that directors would like to pull?
I would like to pull number 3, the personnel agenda.
Number 3, are there any other items? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda minus item 3?
So move.
Second.
Board Secretary Coleman, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That brings us to the personnel agenda that was pulled by Vice President Clausen. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Folks, I pulled this to avoid a conflict of interest. I'll recuse myself from voting on this because I'm on it. I'm going to return to the district in the fall, And instead of doing this work from the 30,000-foot view, I'm going to be back on the ground at West High in the fall. So I'm excited about that opportunity. Bittersweet to have to resign with just over a year of my term left, but that's my announcement tonight and why I'll be recusing my vote on this agenda item. I'll say more later at my last meeting in June, but for now.
Your last meeting in June, got it. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve or additional comments? Motion to approve.
I move that we approve the personal agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Malone, Eastham, Williams, Finch, Abraham, and Lingo voting yea, and Director Clausen abstaining.
Thank you. That brings us to tonight's public hearing. The first one is the 2024 Coralville Central Elementary Restroom Remodel Project. Vice President Clausen.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2024 Coralville Central Restroom Remodel Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 23rd, 2024. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 24th, 2024. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. on May 15th, 2024 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 24th, 2024. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Thank you. We will close that public hearing and move on to our next public hearing, the Center for Innovation Parking and Drive Hard Surface Project. Vice President Clausen.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Center for Innovation Parking and Drive Hard Surface Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 23rd, 2024. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 24th, 2024. The district will receive bids on this project at 10 a.m. on May 16th, 2024 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 24th, 2024. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Thank you. We will close that public hearing and move on to policy review. We have again before us the 800 series policies, buildings, and sites, as well as the policy primers. Director Finch, were there any additional comments or updates to those policies?
No, I think we reviewed them a couple of times already, so nothing new to add.
Great. Any comments or questions from other directors? Okay. We will move on to our presentations for tonight, and the first one is the language services. Is that Superintendent Degner? Do you want to start us off?
I'll just try to give them some lag time to come up to the podium, but we have the learning supports team here this evening to present on the language services that we try to provide in the district in an effort to assist our families and our students and ease those communication efforts. So I'm going to have Laura go ahead and introduce herself and her team to you all, and I think they're just about logged in here. So with that, we'll turn it on over to them.
F11, Laura.
Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody. Thanks for including us tonight for our presentation. We're going to give an overview of our language services. I'm Laura Daly, Director of Learning Supports, and we have Senior Specialist Crystal Morrison with us tonight, and then also Coordinator Corrine Frank. We will define some key terms here in just a few minutes. There's multiple purposes of language services, so we'll go through all of those. We will provide an overview of the tools and services, and then talk about the importance of collaboration, the responsibility that we all can take in providing these services, and just some next steps with continuous improvement. So when we think about those purposes of language services, it really provides access to our families to make communication possible for our families that prefer a language other than English, and sometimes even in addition to English. It is part of federal compliance, although we really want to think of it more as a level of commitment, that we are committed to providing language services and supports for our families. And as part of that process, it helps our families feel a sense of belonging, inclusivity. It connects very well to our high reliability school, safe and supportive school climate. Level 1, it probably connects to other levels too, but that foundational level 1. And providing that equitable access helps our families also share their voice, share their ideas, share their needs, ask questions, so that it's two-way communication and it isn't just about us disseminating information. So it really needs to be an exchange of information as well. Part of that sense of creating belonging for our students and families also values the diversity within our community. We have, as we'll share as we go throughout the presentation, many different languages spoken by our families in the district. We have many different cultural backgrounds in addition to those linguistic backgrounds as well. And highlighting that and thinking of that as a strength is something that's extremely important and will help lift up the students that are in our schools as well. If they see us valuing and committing to providing the language services that their families prefer, deserve, and may need, that helps them as the students also feel that sense of belonging within our school environment. So reducing those barriers and ensuring equal access is extremely important. And improving that multilingual communication and engagement is really what these language services are about. So as I mentioned, there's many purposes, and it goes way beyond an issue of compliance. But I think it also is important to note that there are legal requirements, that we are legally provided to provide language supports to families that indicate that they would prefer to receive communication, meaningful communication in a language other than or in addition to English. So some of the terms to define those, sometimes it can be easy to mix up what interpretation is versus translation. My little tip for that I've learned over time is translation is text. So they both start with a T. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, and that's helpful. But we've defined some of the terms here for what interpretation means as a spoken or signed language assistance. And then translation is written language assistance. LEP, which is part of the compliance and the legal requirements, refers to limited English proficiency. And if you want to know more about that, there's a wealth of information on lep.gov. And video remote interpretation, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is VRI. As we know, there's a lot of acronyms in education. And then also ASL, American Sign Language. Also, to give just a little glimpse into the history of language services in our district, certainly within our Learning Supports Department, we've been overseeing it, I don't know, for about 2.5, almost 3 years now. It was August 2021 when it rolled into our department. But the district has been providing services for years and years prior to that. I remember back in the day when I was a principal and Language Line first came on the scene. And that was when you could call a number, get an interpreter over the phone, and it seemed like it was the best thing ever. We still have Language Line, but we have many other tools that we've developed since then, which we'll share with you tonight. And so that commitment to providing language services has been long-standing. But what happened sometime during the 2021 school year, 2022, or maybe it was 2020, 2021, because it was the tail end of that, a group of people just started to recognize that there were some aspects of the services that we could improve. And so just through talking that through with the support of a lot of people at the ESC was when a dedicated position became a thing. And that was senior specialist Crystal Morrison, who then was hired in August of 2021 to primarily oversee and help add to that continuous improvement effort for our language services. Since then, she's done a fabulous job with the support of Coordinator Frank and many others here at the ESC, attended professional development to learn about best practices in language services, communicated and connected with other districts that have real robust models, and continued to monitor our data. We'll share a little bit about that tonight. As well as continue to monitor our language diversity, because, a little sneak peek, you think you all know the top 5 languages in our district? Well, maybe there's a little change. So we'll hear about that a little bit later as well. And so I think that speaks to, again, the diversity that we value within our community and within our schools, and continuing to monitor that growth and the development of maybe what is changing in our community. Now Iowa City is a primary resettlement location. Sometimes we have families that come from countries that maybe we haven't served before. And so there's just so many reasons for us to continue to pay attention, to monitor, and to continue to scale up these language services. So we are happy that it's been a part of our department for a few years now. And I'll let Senior Specialist Morrison share more about the specific tools so that we can walk you through that. And we do have a few little gifts for you that we will be passing out during the presentation. And then Coordinator Frank will share, will kind of wrap us up with a few of those collaboration opportunities and where we see language services heading in the district as well. And feel free to ask us questions, of course, at the end or throughout the presentation as well.
Thank you. So before we dive into talking about our tools, we just want to discuss a little bit of our district language data. So this data is gathered every year as a part of our enrollment and registration. Families fill out the home language survey when they are enrolling, and they identify if they have a language that they speak in their home other than English. So as you can see, we have 2,781 students, families who have identified that they have a language, home language other than English. And then we have 63 languages spoken throughout our district. And just a note, just because a family indicates they have a language that they speak at home other than English, that doesn't mean that they always necessarily want their communication in that language. And so also from this data that we get from the home language survey, we get our top languages. So we have English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Swahili, Chinese, and Portuguese. And of those, obviously English is our top, but following that is Spanish, with a little over 30% of our students and families that have identified Spanish as their home language. And also you can see from this top language list, we have a language that emerged just this year, Portuguese, which speaks to the diversity that's happening within our district and within our community. So it just happened this year that Portuguese became one of our top district languages. And so also we look at this data and we can see when we disaggregate it by the building, we have families represented in all of our buildings who have identified that they have preferred communication preference outside of English, that they would like their communication in another language. And so all of this information is available and accessible to our buildings and administrators. The student-specific information is housed in Infinite Campus under the home language survey, and then for the district or building-specific data, that is available in Tableau. And so because of the diversity that we are seeing in our district, we have an array of tools and options for our staff that are not only necessary, but they are available for them to utilize. And so we'll start with a general overview of our services. And then following that, I'll go into the different tools. And so we have interpretation and translation services, and we created in 22-23 guidelines for language services for our teachers and staff to show them how to utilize and access the tools. And for that, it shows them how they can arrange interpretation support. So for that, our buildings can enter a request into Red Rover, which is our absence management system. And from there, our district interpreters can view those vacancies and they can fill them to get a job assignment. We have 70 interpreters who represent our top languages. And along with our interpreters, all of them, current and new, have taken a language proficiency test. This is a vetting process that we implemented also in the 22-23 school year, just as a way of quality control and to ensure that we are doing our due diligence to ensure that we are providing quality and accurate interpretation support for our families. And so the next service we have is translation. So document translation requests, staff can submit those in two ways. They can either submit them online through our document translation request form, or they can email the translation at Iowa Email. And the majority of our translation happens, it is student-specific, so special education, student services, in addition to the district documents that we translate. And we have seen an increase in use in that service. As of April 30th, about 30%, we had a 30% increase from last year. And we aren't done with the school year yet. We're still translating documents, And we do not translate documents in-house. We use a translation service, and that is, again, quality control to ensure confidentiality and accuracy of those documents. And then additionally, when it comes to translation services, we do not translate for partner agencies. And we have actually had to push and we encourage our partner agencies that if they have information for our students and families, that they translate those documents into our top languages. So that is a push that we've done with our partner agencies. So looking at some of our communication tools, we want to start with mass communication tools. And these are overseen by our Community Relations Department, but we want to highlight them. These aren't new tools. We've already had these in place, but because of the translation component, that's why we wanted to mention them. So obviously we have our district website, and our new website utilizes Weglot. That's a translation tool. And then on the website, which is linked here, we have a link to our language services page with information for our families and the public about language services. And within the staff portal, we have language services information that's specific to staff. So those guidelines are in the staff portal and some other staff-specific information. And then we have Blackboard, which we use for text, email, and our mobile app messaging options. And that can be used district-wide or on the building level. And as long as parents and guardians have a preferred language indicated in Infinite Campus, it will translate those messages for them. And then lastly, we have our SMORE newsletter. And that newsletter is used primarily at the building level, and it has a translation feature. So individuals who have a preferred language can click the translation button and select which language they would prefer to have that SMORE translated for them. So now on to our language services specific communication tools. So as Director Daly mentioned, Language Line, that's not new to the district. It's been in place as a communication and interpretation support tool. It is on-demand phone interpretation support, and It can be used at any time, accessed at any time by any staff in our district, anybody to get interpretation support. It is especially helpful when we don't have an in-person interpreter available, or if we need language support for a language we don't support in districts. So if we don't have an interpreter who speaks that language, Language Line is really helpful. They have over 240 languages available, and again, it can be used to communicate with parents and guardians at any time. So an example, we see an uptick in our Language Line usage around conference time. It can also be used if a staff or anyone walks into a building and they need language support, or even here at ESC, we've had people who have come in who needed language support, or they called and needed help with something. We can utilize Language Line. Next, which is a new tool, we have Talking Points. And Talking Points is a two-way text communication tool. It was implemented in the 22-23 school year. It offers over 150 languages, and it can be used, again, anytime to communicate with parents and guardians. And then at the secondary level, specifically in high school, it can be used by staff to communicate with those students. And just a little background as to why we landed on Talking Points. Texting, as we know, has become a preferred form of communication for many of our families. And so to increase accessibility and streamline communication, and also just to promote communication, engagement, and connection with our non-English speaking families, that's one of the reasons why we landed on Talking Points. Some other key reasons, in addition to the language translation feature, is it offered the two-way text communication, so it didn't require an app. There is a Talking Points app, but it's not required for families to have it for them to get communication from their teacher or building. And another reason was for support and protection for staff. With Talking Points, it will generate a pre-assigned number, so our staff do not have to use their personal cell phone numbers when they are communicating with families. And so as of April 30th, as you can see, we had over 1 million messages that were sent on the platform for all users. So that is a total of all back and forth communication from everyone who is utilizing that platform. And just for context, last year we ended just shy of 500,000 messages, and now we are well over 1 million messages and communications that have happened on that platform. And so an example of how this tool is being used in the building, we have secretaries who use it for attendance, and then the most powerful, I think, is we have our teachers and administrators who will use it in real time to share those celebrations and successes with their students. So if, for example, kindergarten teachers who will take a picture of activities and shoot that out to their parents, and parents get to see that in real time, what's happening with their student. And then another really powerful use of the tool is just in the moment, if you are having issues with connecting with a parent, phone or email might not be their preference. Talking Points and sending a text is really helpful in getting parents that usually may not engage to engage. So we've had admin and teachers who have spoken to that. And so our last tool is Hands Up. So Hands Up is a contracted service that we use for interpretation support, but the new component of Hands Up is the video remote interpretation. So it offers on-demand video interpretation. You can also schedule interpretation support with them. And one of the benefits of the video remote interpretation is that you can pull up a live interpreter. The client can see the interpreter and engage with them. And phone is great, but when someone can actually visually see someone, that is even more engaging and helpful for them. And then also, the interpreter can pick up on those visual cues, facial expressions, body language. So it is really beneficial for our families when it's being used. We've primarily have used Hands Up in the video remote interpretation to support our American Sign Language students in the district. So if their interpreter wasn't present, they needed a sub, we couldn't get anybody in person, the video remote comes in really handy to support those students. And so we've done a soft rollout of this tool, And currently, right now, our student and family advocates are piloting the mobile app. There's a laptop version, but there's also a mobile app. So the student and family advocates are using it. So if they're out and about doing home visits, they can utilize that mobile app to have interpretation support. And so again, an example of how the video remote is used. I personally used the tool during preschool registration when we were off-site. I was at the North Liberty Rec. We had a parent that walked in that needed to register. We didn't have an interpreter that spoke their language. Pulled out my laptop, opened it up, clicked the button, selected their language, pulled up an interpreter within like 2 minutes, and they were able to walk them through registration. So that's really amazing to have that tool. And then again, it's been used for conferences and buildings for languages where we don't have a district interpreter to support a family's language. So yeah, it's a really cool, it is a really cool tool, and we hope to expand the usage of it going into the next school year. So I know this feels like a lot of information, a lot of tools. How would you use all of these things and remember them? But we understand that all of our families, not just those who need interpretation support, all have communication preferences. So not everybody wants a phone call, not everybody wants an email. Some people will text. So we all have communication preferences, and the hope is that by equipping our administrators and our teachers with a plethora of tools, it will enable them to engage with our students and staff and increase communication.
All right, so quick couple slides on collaboration. This has really been key in rolling all of this work out. Since about 2021, the spring of that year, we've had a multidisciplinary team, including community relations, technology, and then learning supports who've been working together to really look at where are the spaces and places where we need to uplift some different tools or some different strategies to connect. The biggest one that we took over was Talking Points, right? And a really great example of that multidisciplinary team effort. We had community relations leading that acceptable use policy guideline work. The technology department was working through the platform management, any technological issues that came up, and they still manage that as we speak. And then our team was looking at implementation, training, oversight, and kind of how do we get that tool out into the hands of our teachers. So a really, really excellent opportunity to work together. Most recently, that team met with our secretarial staff to get feedback, to really see what was challenging them, what's working, where are the gaps. And so I think we'd be remiss not to shout out our secretaries who are doing a really heavy lift on the front lines every single day utilizing these tools. They gave amazing feedback and have been very, very appreciative and eager really to share and try new things that are coming their way. It is the lift of everyone, and so having this team coming from all these different angles has really helped us be able to do some of the work we've been doing with Fidelity. So what's on the horizon? I'm gonna show you, we have a couple kind of exciting things here. ICCSD really has a ton of staff that speak a ton of languages across the district other than English. So starting next school year, we are going to offer staff the opportunity to have an I Speak button if they speak a language other than English. So a small button. We have a couple examples because we're just putting together what that will look like that could be attached to a lanyard, really just to increase the visibility and the wealth of knowledge that exists across our staff base. We really want to honor that our staff who bring another language into the buildings every day, what that provides for our workforce and also for our students and their families when they connect. So we're super excited about that project. We will have buttons this first go around for Spanish, French, Arabic, Swahili, Chinese, Portuguese, and then also ASL. It's just a nice visible way to really celebrate those staff members. So we're excited about that. And then the other things that we have going on are really that ongoing technical assistance to our teams in the buildings to make sure that we're using all our tools with fidelity. We are also regularly looking, as you've seen, at the language data that we're receiving from our families, as well as what our tools provide to our families to ensure that we're making those connections and we're not having a language show up that isn't served through a tool. So we want to make sure that that is matching. So that's ongoing work over time. And then a couple of the other things that we have going is some strengthening support with the HR department as we train staff to start to get in front of ensuring staff has the tools when they walk into the building for the first time, right? Those language line cards that we shared, those are super easy for staff to have accessible at their desk or at their workstation. And so starting to push some of that information out on the front end. And then finally, we have to give a quick shout out to Nutrition Services because they're using Talking Points as a staff communication tool to uplift that workforce, knowing that we really want to increase who we can hire and ensure that language is an area there as well. So that's been amazing. We're excited to see kind of where that goes and how we can continue to use the tool. And I think I'll just end by saying everything we've talked about tonight really highlights that language support is everyone's responsibility. I think we've mentioned almost every department, right, as we've talked about this and the teaming and the work that we've done together. Crystal's knowledge and leadership really streamlined the resources and the support that's available, but ultimately the lift belongs to everyone. So we're excited you guys have information about all the tools and resources, and we can start to spread that message even further. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that very in-depth presentation. I will open it up to other directors if they have questions or comments. Director Abraham.
I have just a comment. That was really helpful. Like Laura, I remember Language Line coming on thinking, wow, and this is, such a big enhancement on all the different languages that we have and different ways. I love the texting. I mean, you've really done good work. This is a lot of nice steps forward to reach everybody.
It was an amazing overview. I had all these questions about, well, when do you use this? When do you use this? But Crystal explained all of that, so I don't have any questions anymore. I love these language buttons. That's a wonderful addition. And I just had one question about the translators. Are these personnel that we already have on staff, or do we bring them in from the outside, or is it a little bit of both?
So we had already had a pool of our district interpreters that were working here, and so they all took the language test, and then we still readily hire. We always do like a hiring at the beginning of the school year, and then somewhere in the middle as people leave or transition, and then we'll hire again. So usually we do about 2 rounds of hiring in the school year where I will do a hiring for interpreters.
Do they work exclusively as interpreters, or is it someone who maybe has a different role and then is pulled for interpretation? Or
some of them actually work exclusively as interpreters. They do it in between whatever their 9 to 5 job is, and then we have our district paras who are interpreters as well. So it's not all the paras, but some of them also have the interpreter code as a part of their job.
Got it. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Just great overview, really great presentation, and it is very exciting.
I had a quick question regarding requesting document translation. How long does that turnaround take?
So now it takes about 3 to 5 days, depending on the length of the document and depending on which language is being requested. We can turn around in about 3 to 5 days. Prior to that, it was taking a little bit longer, but since we've streamlined everything, 3 to 5 days is like the max that it will take for a document to turn around.
So how are we able to address urgent issues or communication? Is that something that then we use some of our spoken resources?
If it's something that's like urgent, then that's when we would try to utilize an interpreter to help go through the document with someone, and then we can submit it for translation. So the best example of that is like if you have a meeting, you need to go through this letter or this document with a parent, use an interpreter, but you still submit that document to get it translated into their preferred language so that they can read through it.
Great. And yeah, I appreciate the bit of information that you shared, that we're also addressing some of our needs within our staffing and allowing Nutrition Services to pilot that program in order to empower their staff. So I look forward to hearing how that maybe expand throughout some of our other areas. And Director Eastham, it looked like you had a question or a comment.
Yeah, someone else maybe.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Again, it's a very encouraging and empowering presentation. I wasn't aware that we did come this far in the breadth and depth of our interpretation and translation service support. I do want to say again, I've raised this before, that working with the Center for Worker Justice and other groups that I'm involved with, I hear still continuously concerns by parents or people who are talking with parents who do not use English as their primary language about communicating with us as a school district, communicating with their student, with their teachers, with their principal, with other staff members. So I just wanted to ask briefly if you think, I'm sure you do, that we are reducing that number of parents who try to communicate and don't come away satisfied. I have heard that one of the things that parents ask for is having at each building, actually, a contact person that they are comfortable with who speaks their language and that they can interact with about their student at that building. I'm not quite so sure that's a practical thing for us to try for, an actual contact person in multiple languages at each building. But we certainly have, as you're describing, a lot of interpretive and translation tools now that are available to staff in those buildings. I do wonder if there is a role for you, Crystal, go through Matt and making this comment. For being a staff person that I can say, call Crystal if you have a concern about communicating with your student's teacher or principal, and she'll help you. Now, not to single you out, Crystal, I'm sure you don't need more duties. But my point is that is a request, and it might, in my mind anyway, help to have a contact person that's available to parents to work at the initial work of getting their communication channels opened up for their student. And I also had a question, is WhatsApp is a fairly common communication tool, social media tool. Are these translation services available with the WhatsApp application?
I've used WhatsApp personally, but I can't speak about it in the professional environment, so I don't know the abilities or capabilities of WhatsApp specifically.
Well, if that's something that parents want to have available to them, sure that'll become knowledgeable. And I'm also very encouraged to see that we have a multidisciplinary team now, which I think would help us meet systematically some of those same concerns that parents have, that they're still not quite getting the communication channels like they would like to have them. Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? Thank you again for the presentation. We appreciate it. Next up is our presentation on one-to-one technology. Superintendent Degner.
Yeah, Mr. Fenstermaker is going to come to the podium here and deliver a presentation around one-to-one technology, so I'll let him introduce himself and open the presentation. I would just say, we've had some conversations about or heard from concerned constituents about a multitude of things, right? Cell phone, screen time, the one-to-one program that we use with our Chromebooks. And so as a starting point, we really wanted to just provide you a framework or information on what our one-to-one program is, the things that similar a little bit to language services, about some of the services we have, some of the things we try to do, and then to create, a starting point for the conversation. So I'm sure there'll be follow-up questions and potentially even some follow-up conversation that we want to have with this. So if there's not something we're able to answer tonight, we can definitely come back to it in that regard. But I think first we wanted to kind of provide a base level education for everybody about what it is, how we got to where we are, some of the features of the program, some of the things we know we still need to work on and look to do. And again, the last thing I'd say is just a favor to Andrew to be kind. Our Adam and Josh are both gone today. So we were talking about a heck of a time to schedule this presentation with our two top tech guys out, but that would be another good reason we could come back with information if something we're not able to answer. But I know Andrew will do a fine job here for us this evening too, and with that, I'll turn it over to him.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I just came from my son's baseball game. My wife's back there texting, what's this infield fly thing that should I know about that? But anyways, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Andrew Fenstermaker. I serve as the instructional tech coordinator. Prior to that, I was one of the instructional design strategists with a focus of tech and innovation for the district. And then prior to that, I was in the classroom as an elementary classroom teacher. With that, I'll just dive right into it. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the one-to-one program, provide a little context to you, and hopefully kind of paint a picture of what the current reality is within the district. So with that, kind of three overarching categories that I have. The first one really being the purpose, like why do we give students the devices? Then jumping into the process, like how do these devices get leveraged by students? And then kind of wrap up with the product. What are the outcomes of each student having a device? And so with that, to give you kind of a timeline in our journey currently, as you see back in 2015 to 2017, we started the planning and testing phase to explore what devices and what kind of implementation model might match us best. And then that led to us launching through 9/12 for the 2017-2018 school year with that Chromebook as that one-to-one device for specifically 9th through 12th grade students. As you see, there's a year gap when we finally scaled to 7th and 8th grade students. And so then by 2020, you can see we had 7th through 12th grade students were using one-to-one devices, specifically a Chromebook. The one caveat there is you see in orange, in the spring of 2020, we had to fast track our timeline to get devices in the kids' hands for remote learning. We had intentions to look in depth at the implementation of one-to-one devices in the elementary setting. We had previously started to increase access at the elementary level with carts for those different buildings. But again, we had to kind of fast track that timeline. The one thing I did point out here is the 24-25 school year. I did point out some enhancements, and I'll address those here shortly, but really I just wanted you to see the fact that we're still constantly revising and iterating on this process so that we can continue to meet the needs of all the students in the district. With that said, just what is the purpose? Why are we giving every student a device in the district? I kind of broke it down into 4 categories. I'll highlight each of these categories, but also I tried to connect it to our Portrait of a Graduate as well. So really kind of the first reason to equip students with the device is really that foundation of anytime, anywhere access, as well as giving them some of the accessibility features within those devices that they give, those Chromebooks. And so really when we think about the Portrait of a Graduate, when we think about developing our students that have digital citizens in mind, and also thinking about that access to have that learner's mindset and keep them curious. So that anywhere, anytime learning or that access to technology provides students to seek out insights into those wonderings that they have. We know learners are very curious, so we want to keep that learner's mindset, and then also being able to break down the classroom walls with that one-to-one device in the classroom allows students that anytime, anywhere access to experts beyond the classroom walls. Moving into the second piece of that is really allowing us to engage learners through multimodal instructional design. So embedding more opportunities for students for a more personalized experience, but then also fostering more collaboration. And so when you think about our Portrait of a Graduate empathy, really collaboration is at the root of it, is really developing the perspectives of others and developing empathy for others. So that collaboration piece is really paramount in that empathy side of our Portrait of a Graduate. Moving into that third piece, really, how do we amplify student voice and agency? So by giving each student a device, the purpose behind that was to amplify their voice. And so thinking specifically about communication and critical thinking, which are part of those core competencies of the Portrait of a Graduate. And so specifically like communication, providing them that device provides multiple modes for them to express their thinking. And by having multiple modes to express their thinking, we have to think critically about that content, but also the end user, who's that message for, who that audience is. And so really critically evaluating the way that they make their thinking visible for not only their classroom teacher, but also their peers. And then lastly, really by embedding these devices in the hands of students, we're really allowing us as educators to kind of reimagine what learning can look like and transform that learning experience to be really student-centric and employ some of those instructional design strategies like inquiry-based learning or blended learning. And so with that in mind, thinking about adaptability as that last core competency of our Portrait of a Graduate by providing these instructional strategies that allows our students to stay agile regardless of their future workforce path that they take. And I think what's centered on all of this is the fact of equity. We're really trying to remove barriers for our learners to be successful in that classroom environment. This is just one sample data set to speak to that point about removing barriers for our learners. And so this is one of the online registration questions that talks about student access to devices beyond the district issued device. So what you're seeing here, based on demographics, is going to be a representation of students that do not have additional computer access beyond the district issued Chromebook. And so one of the things that I'll point out with this, it's kind of a key point, is this is a snapshot of the entire district. So if you go to specific buildings, this data is gonna look slightly different. So for example, like the Hispanic Latino population, if we look at Hills, it's actually a 73% with those that are Hispanic or Latino that do not have an additional device beyond this district issued Chromebook. So just keep that in mind as you look at this data. It's district snapshot, not individual buildings. So each individual building will vary depending on what building we're talking about. Moving into kind of the process, we talked a little bit about how are these devices being used. So one of the things we have access to is to look at some analytics to see what are the students using on the devices. So I pulled the top 6 applications in the last 28 days based on some analytics that we can gather. And so what I want to point out, this is focused specifically on K-6, so looking at the top and working our way down. Lexia and Happy Numbers, as you can see there, it's a slight description underneath of it that talks about it's an adaptive resource that is fostering more learning around math and language arts. If we jump down to the next row, Pebble Go is a database resource for students, and the nice thing about it is very kid-friendly, so it employs some of those additional scaffolds, such as having the text read aloud. Being a former first grade teacher, I know that it's very important to include multiple scaffolds for those learners to access and decode and interpret what the content is actually saying. The ZB portal is actually the Super Kids, so our K2 curriculum for language arts. That ZB portal gives those students access to additional supplemental and interactive resources. And then the bottom two, as you can see there, Google Docs and Google Slides. We are a Google district. We're using Google Chromebooks, so it provides those opportunities for those students for real-time presentation design, real-time document, word processing, but also the collaborative aspect of that. And then the YouTube piece on there is just that on-demand resource for learning. If we pivot into the secondary world, as you can see, we kind of transition into Canvas as that centralized hub for our learners to access information from their learning journey. And so within there, I think the other two that kind of feed right into that is Google Docs and Google Slides. It allows those students to interact with content, but also use those two resources to develop their understanding of concepts, but also then showcase their thinking back to teachers and also collaborate with others. And when we're talking about demonstrating understanding, Google Forms is also a resource that teachers can employ to do quick checks for understanding with students, but also GimKit that's on there is a gamified approach to reinforcing some of those concepts that are talked about in the classroom, but also providing some metrics to the teacher to provide just-in-time instructional moves based on the data that they see. And then again, as you see, YouTube is also on there as a resource that's used by our 712 students. With that, to give you a more kind of in-depth kind of view, what does this actually mean? Give me a concrete example. So here are kind of 3 elementary examples. Book Creator, as you see there, is a multimodal digital authoring tool. So recently, first grade teacher looking to take an analog writing process and allow those first graders to become published authors essentially in a digital format. So it allowed those students to use text, use images, use voice to text, use audio recordings to tell their story in a digital format and then share that with their peers and also a broader audience. The Microbit is a microcontroller. Actually, the foundation, through the Big Idea Hunt, funded the Microbit purchase for every 4th grade student in the district. Those microbits are embedded within our science curriculum itself in the energy unit in 4th grade. And it provides not only opportunities to reinforce the science concepts, but also it gives them hands-on opportunities for computer science and computational thinking. And again, that's embedded right within their curriculum, and it leverages the Chromebook to program those microbits. And then lastly, WeVideo on there is a dynamic video production tool. And while some students and teachers at the elementary level might use that for the video production, a more common theme that I've seen across the district is elementary teachers and students using it for audio podcasting. And then when we really think about how do we communicate in a modern world, in a digital era, that is a powerful tool for those students to get their thinking across in not only video format, but also audio format. Again, if we pivot to the secondary world, just 3 different tools and 3 different examples at the secondary level of how these devices might be used. So Microsoft Flip is a tool that students can basically use the webcam on their Chromebook to record video and audio in real time and record it to a space that then is embedded right within Canvas. So this example, high school PE teacher was leveraging this. Kids set up their Chromebook to record, as they did in performance PE, some max out movements and exercises with weights. And that allowed the teacher then to critique asynchronously and provide feedback to the student as that teacher is not able to see all the students in real time. It gave them a mechanism to also see and provide feedback. BandLab is a tool, as you can see there, it allows that kind of co-collaboration and co-construction of music. And so an example of this was in the secondary world. Using this tool, they took a movie clip, for example, they stripped out the actual audio that went with it, and then they actually rescored that movie clip. So what they were doing is they were collaboratively working to use some of the loops that were provided, or also record some additional audio pieces out in the wild, and then combined all of those to rescore, basically create the new music that went along with that audio or that movie clip. And then Pear Deck, I'll point out there, just that last one here. It is not only a presentation tool, but it allows the teacher to embed differentiated access to resources. So it embeds some scaffolds for them to access the content, but also embeds some questions to get real-time insights on the learning and processing of students. I think a more common use of it is something called Flashcard Factory, which allows me as a teacher to construct some vocab words and concepts within the classroom, and then the students actually partner up and work collaboratively. One of them actually is the artist or the sketcher that illustrates that vocab word, and their partner has to write a sentence that goes along with it. Then they flip-flop roles until all the vocab words are completed. At the very end, everyone comes together, and then they review all those designs anonymously to continue to develop and deepen their understanding of all those vocabulary concepts. Thinking kind of about the product piece here, when we talked about kind of the learning language or the language piece here just previously with the presentation, when we talk about removing barriers, some additional features of these Chromebooks and putting them in the hands of students. Chromebooks come built in with a ton of accessibility features natively within the operating system. One of those most common is the select to speak, which basically lets a student highlight any of the text, and then when they let go, it'll actually read that text aloud to them. The other piece there is dictation, which allows some of those students to use their voice to then turn their voice into text. As you can see, Immersive Reader, if you're unfamiliar with Immersive Reader, it's actually something that's built into our Canvas, which is our learning management system at the secondary level. And I'll speak a little bit more about that here shortly. But Immersive Reader, what that lets them do as a learner, as it basically takes the text, they can select part of the text, they can select the whole entire text. It'll actually read it aloud to them, but the powerful piece of it is that also allows them to select their language, and it'll automatically translate the whole entire passage and read it to them in that language that they selected. Also within there in accommodations and read and write, the piece about the accommodations is by leveraging these devices, we do have some of our individualized education plans or 504s that do require us to provide a device for the students to remove some of those barriers for learning. And then Read and Write, it's actually a Google product. It's called Google Read and Write. And it has on there over 350,000 events this year. I'll kind of highlight what that actually means. So here's kind of an example. As Read and Write, I can use this extension. So one of the features is a picture dictionary. It lets me highlight all of the text as well. It'll read it aloud to me. I can also use what they call like a masking tool. So it'll actually mask the words that I want to read to help with students' focus. It'll also let me use voice to text if I would like to use voice to text. So basically all of those tools, every interaction with that tool is considered an event. So we have a lot of students that have leveraged this as a resource in the classroom to remove some of those barriers and make learning more accessible. To give you kind of some, where are these devices actually being deployed and leveraged by teachers in the classroom setting? So this was a survey that we gave to teachers that recently we collected. You can see here that independent work time within the instructional process is where we see a lot of frequent use. If we pivot to whole group instruction, you can see it's not as high every single day, but there is some consistent use throughout the week of whole group instruction across K-12. And then when we talk about accessing an LMS, and so that's the learning management system, as you can see by grade, we have use of accessing information. We live in a digital world, and so a lot of our resources come in a digital format. And so some teachers leverage those accessibility features on our Chromebooks to allow kids, again, to remove the barriers to access the learning through that learning management system.
Could you give an example of accessing learning management system?
Yeah, so with that, so with the learning management system, currently right now, our 7 through 12 leverages Canvas as the LMS platform. And so within K-6, over the past, Seesaw was our LMS platform, and that was really out of the transition to COVID and remote learning. There's a lot of other layers that go into why we went with Seesaw, but as of next year, we will be moving to Canvas for K-12 to standardize that learner's experience. So for example, when the student accesses the learning management system, if that teacher has put on the resources, not that the teacher has to use it every single day, but if they want to create that digital access maybe for students that aren't present that day, or also to leverage some of those built-in accessibility features such as Immersive Reader, that would be a way that they could leverage Canvas, for example, to access that content and provide some of those accessibility features. To kind of wrap up, kind of next steps, where are we going from here, right? So short term, kind of thinking about, in the short term, we're going to try to get some feedback on utilization. So seeking out input from our teachers on the ways in which they're utilizing the Chromebooks to allow us to evaluate and continue to refine what is best for our teachers and students in the district. Also audit, what is our current reality of sending the Chromebooks home at the elementary level? So audit that process and practice, and then also start to collect some data on the equipment repairs, also the replacement and refresh cycle to ensure that we're in alignment. Then also looking at an extension, allow versus block list. I'll speak to this a little bit. In the short term, what we are looking at doing right now on the Chromebooks, there are extensions. Extensions add additional functionality to the Chrome web browser. The extensions right now currently are on a block list, which means every extension that is out there is available for students unless there has been an explicit block in place. We're moving to an allow list, which basically means that all the Chrome extensions are blocked unless they have been allowed. So we will be moving and pivoting that starting the 24-25 school year. So that'll be a change kind of not only short term now because we're reviewing and vetting a lot of those so that we can kind of grandfather in some that we know have educational merit that have been used. So for example, like Google Read and Write is a Chrome extension. So that's one of those that would be kind of accepted as like, yep, this is one that we have approved and aligns with what we're doing. The other piece here is kind of standardizing the LMS platform, which I spoke to briefly just about K-12 using Canvas. We've created templates so that if a student's in class period 1 versus class period 8, the template and structure and format is already standardized so that it's a similar experience on all of those, as well as standardizing the expectations for what the usage should be of those. Also looking at software vetting, so we're gonna deploy a system that allows teachers to request certain software applications that they would like to use to be vetted. So that aligns with our high reliability school initiative and allowing us to ensure that we're having a guaranteed and viable curriculum. In addition, it allows us to make sure that if they request software, that it doesn't necessarily put us at risk with privacy concerns or also cybersecurity concerns. Also thinking in the future too about now that we've kind of started to scale out NASOT, so the new Art and Science of Teaching, it gives us a common language and framework for that instructional design process. So when we talk about building out learning experiences with the Chromebook in mind, now we have a common language that all of our teachers can talk about. So if I'm looking at how do I increase response rates in my classroom through that lens of using a Chromebook, we can now have that common framework to work from using those devices as that mechanism to increase response rates. And then lastly, talking about the use and design divide. So recently, the National Ed Tech Plan came out of the Department of Ed Tech, out of the government level, of talking about, we typically hear about the digital access divide, which we've spoke to the access that we provided for students. The other piece that has come out of COVID and really been seen to be amplified due to COVID is this use and design divide. And so use really goes down to, are we asking students to passively use the devices, or are we asking students to actively use the devices? So for example, am I having them just sit there and consume information, or am I having them actively construct learning? So an example of that, the WeVideo example where the students are actively creating a podcast, or the book creator example, or even that band lab where they're using music, that'd be active use versus passive consumption. And then the design divide is also thinking about the ways in which teachers are designing their learning experience, knowing they have access to the Chromebooks within the classroom. So those are things that we're looking at. How do we leverage the report that came out from the Department of Ed Tech to guide the ways that we might work with growing teacher capacity, but also how do we also leverage the systems we have in place, such as the new Art and Science of Teaching, in conjunction with our high reliability school initiative to ensure that we're continuing to refine our craft as practitioners and better meet the needs of all of our students in the district. And then again, all that is really centered around, just like we talked about to start this, around equity. So I think that's all I got. That was a lot.
All right, directors, are there any questions? Feel free to jump in.
I just have a couple comments. I really am pleased to hear that you're moving from a block list to an allow list, because that's just a lot simpler than trying to figure out what kids have figured out how to use. So that's great. And also just thinking hard about the passive or active use of devices. Obviously, we want to do more active use, and so I'm pleased to hear both those points that you talked about.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So what kind of PD do teachers get on the various tools? And everything from obviously Canvas, which we're expecting them to use for assignments, grading, I assume all that, and then the other things too. So what's the training for teachers?
Yeah, great question. So to your question specifically about Canvas, I am in the process of developing a proposal right now that looks at how we can scale the professional learning, knowing that we have the onboarding of our K-6 teachers to develop their capacity with using it, but then also we're standardizing some expectations and templates, which hasn't necessarily been the past practice. We have some templates that we leveraged during COVID, but reviewing those they're not super accessible. When you're using Immersive Reader, it cannot necessarily read some of the ways that we designed content in the past. So we're looking at removing some of those barriers. So that's looking at how we can provide some learning for 7-12 teachers, but also K-6. So that's a proposal I have that I'm taking to directors, and then we'll kind of look at what are the approaches we can take in the fall to continue building teacher capacity. This spring, we've already had some ongoing learning sessions for teachers on Canvas about these changes to kind of start front loading for the fall. In terms of other instructional technology pieces, a lot of it is our librarians are amazing at helping be those on-demand boots on the ground in the building to support those teachers with some of those in the moment questions. Our instructional coaches do an amazing job also of helping equip teachers with some of the knowledge of, now that we have that new art and science of teaching, how do we look at the instructional design process with those instructional technology tools with that common language. Does that get at you?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, here's what I hear. It's not enough and we need a lot more. Because that's my experience too, working in Cedar Rapids. Here's Infinite Campus, but we're not going to show you how to use it. Just figure it out. I mean, there just is no training, right? And I get that it's a competition for time, but because all of this I'm really excited about. Standardization, like getting some templates out there so we're not all reinventing the wheel all the time. You know, limiting the app, there's so many apps, I think there's too many, right? And so limiting, having an allow list, I think all of these are great. Google Read Write, I mean, I'm a special ed teacher. This is, but again, very few people really know how to use the tool. Certainly the kids don't. And so that's where I'm at, you know, just kind of as we move forward with this, just really prioritizing its training. I'd rather have fewer tools and everybody knows how to use them really well than a whole bunch of tools that a few people know how to use. So that's just kind of where I'm at with that because I'm all on board. As far as access goes, I mean, and this will lead into my next question, like, this is huge that some kids take this Chromebook home and that's the computer in the house. And understanding how to use that, I just think it's a huge equity thing. It is preparing everyone, and especially as the use is active, right? That's really preparing them for the world. So that leads into this thing. The non-active use, kids, and I'm sure Brady never has to deal with this in his high-level classes, when you're trying to teach something, but of course they're watching anime, you know, how do we control for that? You know, when you've got a class of 30 kids and they're on their Chromebook and you're teaching them, you have some instruction, how do you monitor 30 kids on a Chromebook when they may, say, not be doing the thing that you may be expecting them to do?
It's $1 million question, right?
I don't know if it's $1 million. It might be more because I don't know how much GoGuardian costs, but it might be around $1 million.
Yeah, to speak to that a little bit. So we do have, when we think about the instructional design process in the classroom, I think that's what you'd probably be surprised by is when we look at the number of minutes that devices are being used. And I'll elaborate on this a little bit. So we're kind of limited on what we can pull data-wise. So all of our district devices have Clever, and it's an extension that is on their device that will capture what sites they're visiting and for how long. Now, it's not an exhaustive list of websites, so we're limited as to what list of apps and websites that Clever has on their master list. It is a pretty robust list, but again, it's not comprehensive and exhaustive list. We're able to pull those analytics. The downfall of that is we don't have a timestamp, so we don't have an ability to look if it's on-site or off-site use. So that's part of the challenge with that metric is we know that we have students that take these devices home. It's one of their only devices, and we want to remove the barrier for those students to have that access to information at home, to entertainment at home, to be able to do some of those things that their peers might do that have an abundance of access. And so that's one of the challenges with that data that we're able to pull in. But what we did notice, if we look at some of that data by grade, a lot of the applications they're using within the classroom are very minimal in the number of minutes. So for example, like the YouTube one you saw on there that was very, very high, when we look at the number of minutes, you probably go, well, that's a ton of minutes. But if you actually look at the number of days, so I was able to pull it over the entire year, as well as the last 28 days and last 7 days, and you're really, really limited, less than 10 minutes we're talking in a day that they might be using that. And that's also, I don't know if it's on site or at home too. So that, again, it could skew that data a little bit. And so when we think about the device access and that potential challenge of our kids using it actively or passively, I think teachers are finding that balance within that classroom and that instructional design, and finding ways. And I think there's also been feedback from the students that would prefer that balance. They've communicated, like, can we just have this in an analog format today? Can we leverage some of those analog tasks to have those conversations with peers? Because if you think about, to your point about limiting the number of apps and getting really good at it, if I'm using Pear Deck in period 1 and Pear Deck in period 2 and Pear Deck in period 3, now I'm escalating that behavior issue, because as a student, I'm not gonna wanna engage with that if you're making me do the same thing every single class period. So I think there's lots of nuances with this in terms of the data that we can look at to support, like, there is some use of it, but I don't think it's as high as what we maybe anticipated. And then also thinking about that, the comment about Go Guardian piece, I know that's the tech department doesn't make that decision. I know that's been a teaching and learning decision around that screen monitoring piece. It is something right now that we have a very, very small pilot that's looking at not Go Guardian, but a solution that we have built into some of our current infrastructure, and getting the feedback from those teachers. That'll be at the end of this school year that we'll have some of that data that will be presented to the teaching and learning directors to get some feedback and just start the conversation of, here's some of these options. As we pointed out in the presentation, we're constantly in a state of beta. We're kind of trying to iterate and continue to improve and enhance the learning for all students.
Great. I will stop my questions. I could go on, but it's fascinating, because it's important, it's critical, we need it, and there's all kinds of challenges that we, I mean, we're not even talking about cell phones, right? We're just talking about Chromebooks, so I'm not going to open that right now. But
I
thank you.
I'm going to give Andrew a break for just 1 second, and then Director Clausen, add on to one of your earlier questions. We'd agree on the training piece, and we always think professional development, especially high-quality professional development on the tools that we know are going to benefit kids, is very important. And it's not an excuse, but I think it's just important to remember the reality of, we rolled out one-to-one at the height of COVID. And so from the get-go, we were playing catch-up, right? It was a new learning environment. We were trying to provide the tools to make sure that learning was taking place, and that we were meeting the needs of our students, both in the classroom and at home. And so, as Andrew said, I think he phrased it good. We've been in a beta stance as we move forward with that, in terms of trying to look at that. And so again, not something that's an excuse of why, but we often talk about building the plane as we fly it. This has been something that we do, and we know technology increases at a pace that's more rapid than anything else that we're doing. And so we're always playing catch up. And I think our tech team's done a nice job of continuing to not only chase that, but get us out in front of some of those pieces in the work that we're doing. And then what Andrew said there at the end, we are conscious of staying on task, and then that engagement in the classroom. And so that pilot is a crucial piece for us, getting that feedback from our teachers, from our students, and then looking at tools and ways to do that. We've looked at options in the past, including Go Guardian, and does that really support what we want going on in the classroom? What are the potential misuses? And so those are the things we can try to continue to look at about all the different tools as we monitor these different pieces and weigh the pros and cons of the work that we're doing. That's all I've got, so that's your, no, I'm kidding.
So thank you a lot for this presentation. It was really a lot of information that you packed into a very tiny amount of time, because you speak very fast. But I think, looking at some of the disparities of our groups that have access to technology versus those who don't, I think really cements that the one-to-one is a really important part of the equity component of what we're doing in the district. And then I like that you went through and really kind of demonstrated, at least to me, that we're being thoughtful about how we're using the Chromebooks in the classroom. I agree with what Director Abraham said about the changes. I would also just like to say I'm thrilled as a parent who struggled with Seesaw that we are getting rid of Seesaw. It was not my favorite, and it's a little clunky to use. So I'm thrilled that we're hearing that. But I think the broader point I want to talk about, or just bring up, to not necessarily your problem, so you're off the hook a little bit, but to the team, are the cell phones. Because even if we got Go Guardian, even if we have the blocks, the allows versus the blocks, they're going to pull out their phone and watch the anime video in the classroom. And I talked to my husband about this presentation and one-to-one, and he said the Chromebooks are not the problem. That's not the problem in the classroom. The problem in the classroom are the cell phones. And so if we want to have a discussion about how do we keep students on task in our classrooms, it's not, a part of it is training the teachers to use the technology so it's active and not passive, but like that's like 5%. The 95%, the elephant, are the cell phones. And what can we do about discouraging use or limiting access or banning or whatever? And I know we all got emailed an article about the Washington Post. I then had the joy of having multiple other parents email me that same article. But there are schools out there that are finding success with limiting cell phones in the classroom. And the Washington Post article had covered some of them. There's several other news articles out there. I would really like to see us move forward with a more critical analysis of what we can do in the district here to address that problem. And I don't know if the first step there is gathering data. I love data, but talking to our teachers and maybe doing a Qualtrics, but really getting feedback from those on the front line that are, what are the problems that you're seeing with the cell phones? Because maybe there aren't any. I mean, maybe the teachers will say, Brady's laughing at me. Maybe the teachers will say everything's fine. But my guess is that we could actually get some really good information by talking to them about what are the issues, and then having the team really start to work to address how can we solve those problems in a way that develops learning. I just believe after reading a bit about it and looking into and hearing anecdotally, but also these studies, that the schools in the next 10 years are, I think, really going to separate by the educational experience that students receive with how they address cell phone technology in the classroom. I really think that's going to be what separates students who leave a district as fully rounded students ready to go into society and contribute, and those who just sit for 4 years in high school and leave and they don't have a foundation of knowledge under their belts. And I think we need to, that's what we want, the first, that's our portrait of a graduate. And so if we're going to have fidelity to what we're doing in the district, it's tough and parents don't like it and students don't like it, but I really think we have to bite it off and take it on. And now is the time.
I'm going to bring it back to the one-to-one for a little bit. A little bit about me. I'm the one that asked for this discussion. It started by a fifth grader telling me that, it's really weird your daughter's going to get a computer next year. I'm like, what? Because I'm a little bit absent sometimes, but I found out that the rollout meant that my 5-year-old child is going to get a laptop that I purposely limit screen time for. And when you talk about empathy, screen time is inversely related to children building empathy for children under 6. There's multiple studies on it, and so I'm just like, okay. And then the next day, I heard from a teacher. And then within a week, I heard from a parent. And it's been kind of this rolling thing. I've heard from medical professionals. We had a doctor here, someone from State Children's Hospital. And to give you my background, my master's thesis was on an educational technology program. I taught tech in the classroom for master's and bachelor's students at the University of Iowa. And I am the end product of the technological economy, where I sit on my ergonomic chair every day staring at my 34-inch big screen computer and do coding during the day. But I have developed eyes, I have an anti-blue light monitor, I have anti-blue light glasses that protect my eyesight. So when I sit for 8 hours and then my other 2 hours in the evening on the computer, I have those protections. So I have a series of questions here, and it's going to take some time, and I apologize to my board members, but I've heard from probably 24 parents and teachers throughout the district and a group of middle school teachers, and they gave me a lot of questions and a lot of thoughts. So first, when a student has a broken laptop, who fixes it? Because I keep hearing the librarians are spending a significant amount of their time fixing computers during the day.
Yeah, so basically what happens at Chromebook, it depends if it's truly broken or sometimes just a good old reset, a restart of it. And so what we found is a lot of times teachers might try to navigate that initially to restart it and try some initial troubleshooting so that those students have access and have the barriers removed. If it's not working, sometimes it does go to the librarian as kind of initial style, like, hey, can you go get a loaner? So that's why a lot of times they'll go to the library at the elementary level to get a loaner computer. So that way we can kind of replace it in that moment and then continue to troubleshoot. Those devices are sent back to the central office here, and we have technicians that then do the repairs on those, depending on if it is something that has lots of issues that need to be repaired versus maybe just evaluating a factory reset of it or power washing it.
What does the student do without the computer in the meantime?
They get a loaner from the library.
Okay. And this is a question more towards probably Superintendent Degner or maybe Assistant Superintendent Ramey, since Mr. Kurth is not here tonight. In a blog post from a few years ago, CFO Kurth estimated that the cost of the Chromebook would be between $1.25 and $1.5 million a year. Is that still the cost of the program for the district?
Yes. I mean, in kind of basic terms, when we rolled it out back in 2001, we spent about $4.6 million to replace all of the student devices, and then they're on 4-year cycles. And so as we replace or as we have to do making replacements or repairs, that number that Adam used, that 1.25, 1.5, is kind of that ongoing amount that we spend on an annual basis to make those repairs. Now, the money originally came from our ESSER funds, but then on a rolling basis, we actually use save dollars to replenish and to repair the savings. One of the parts that also helps us out is we have what we call we have break. Let me get this right. Break fix insurance that we purchase through the management fund. And then when our technicians fix or work on the Chromebooks, we're reimbursed at a rate of $110 per hour for their labor, but those dollars actually go back to the general fund. And so then we can turn around and use those dollars to pay for salaries of our technicians and other folks inside the district. And so while we do on average spend between 1.25 and 1.5 million, we see a lot of those dollars and actually reimbursed to the district from categorical funding to the general fund for our use either to support tech or other purposes in the district.
So that's what pays for the extra tech workers on top of it. How, like, when the doctor last month came, how do you respond? And this is probably for other superintendents, assistant superintendent. How do you respond to those kind of health concerns among our students in the district?
I mean, I don't think anyone would debate the research that too much screen time is bad for kids. I think that Director Williams pointed out that it's not just our Chromebooks, it's use of personal devices both in the school setting and also at home. And so I don't think that we'd have a good answer to say that the research that they're telling us is not right. But I think then it goes back to also the points that Andrew made about what that utilization rate is, how students are utilizing them in the school setting, and then also our view and actually kind of the broader educational view about how technology plays a supportive role in instruction, both for our students at all grade levels as we look at generating 21st century learners. So we wouldn't debate that there are obviously concerns with excessive screen time. I mean, just like you talked about, Director Lingo, a lot of our jobs are sitting in front of screens all day too. But I think we have to weigh some of those challenges against what we see as the educational benefits of technology for our students as we prepare them to be productive citizens out in society.
I mean, the thing about the one-for-one program, and I've talked to Superintendent Degner about that, despite Google having a $2.1 trillion market cap, they have not produced one piece of evidence to show that the implementation of Chromebooks builds students' academics or produces better behavioral outcomes or any sort of outcomes. I mean, this is a company that has so much money that could fund these studies, but there's nothing there. And I'm just, you know, and I'll continue with my questions, but, you know, so when we talk about in the classroom, and I know it's a beta and you're running and catching up, why do we not have something like GoGuardian on the computers already? Because that was one of the things that I heard from the middle school teachers, that they really feel that they need something to turn off the monitor during their class so that those students can learn.
I don't know if Andrew has anything else to share on this one. I mean, they kind of shared that it's a teach and learning decision. And when teach and learning teams talked about it before, it's what do you want the teacher doing? Do you want them sitting at their desk and watching what every screen that the student is on? Or do we want the teacher through the room and looking at instructional strategies to try to engage the students? And I would also connect it back to what Director Williams says. We can do a survey, but I think we could all pretty confidently say what the survey is going to tell us is the problem, and it's the phones.
The teachers that I've heard
management of the
from said
Chromebook.
that having to walk around the room and look at the monitors is just as much as the cell phones.
Well, what we would talk about is we'd come back to instructional design. And so I can understand maybe the part about that they'd want to be able to instantaneously, you know, remove the students' access to whatever site they're on. But for us, I think investing in that product versus investing in instructional pedagogy about how we would more effectively use those as a tool, or to not use them as a tool if it's something you're not comfortable about. There's no reason that they even have to be used as a tool if that's become a problem for you in the classroom. And so for us, that's where it's been separate from what the technology team has said. That's feedback that we let our instructional folks work through with principals and teacher leaders.
You know, when the doctor was here last month, she asked about students being able to require text in textbooks and paper form. Do we allow that, or how does that work with?
We do have an opt-out process that that families can go through either to limit or to opt out of the Chromebook program altogether. However, that doesn't opt them out of our instructional programs. And so it just opts them out of the district-provided Chromebook. You know, if there is a reason that would be requested, there's a process that they could go through, and then it would be done on an individual basis in terms of whether or not that would be granted. But our curriculum, I mean, as Andrew talked about, has digital platforms embedded in it. And so if they were to opt out, it would be an opt-out or an attempt or a process to opt out like any of our other instructional programs.
And I'm going to move into some questions outside the classroom because you kind of touched on some of the other things earlier. Why, if we don't have a homework policy within the school district, why are students bringing Chromebooks home when they're like, we don't have a homework, you have a no homework policy from kindergarten to 8th grade. So why are we sending Chromebooks home? That was a popular question given to me.
I think that's a misnomer. We don't actually have a no homework policy for kindergarten to 5th grade. I mean, there's research about how much homework should be provided, but the district does not have a standard policy of no homework kindergarten to 8th grade.
And when you talked about, I'm sorry,
Andrew.
When you talked about the access when students get home, like there's a different set of websites allowed. Do we not allow social media platforms through our Chromebooks? Like, is Facebook, Twitter, whatever it may, or X, whatever it may be, are those blocked?
Through our on-site filtering, yes, it is. If you think about terms of service, a lot of the social media platforms, terms of service, 13 or older have to have access to it. So on-site school filtering does prohibit access to those social media sites. As far as going off the network, off the district site, then they do have more access beyond what they would normally have on our district filter.
So we're allowing access to social media platforms on our school computers off-site.
That would be dependent on what Securely has set up by parents at home.
Moving on to that, Securely, what kind of education are parents given on how to use that app? or the application?
I think that's one where, I was gonna jump in there when Andrew was answering that last question, where we probably have a lot of improvements we can make on that. We communicated a lot of information around COVID when we were distributing the devices, and that's probably something we need to come back to more, because that's really the parent's ability to filter, block different things that they wouldn't want their student to have access to. So I think we could acknowledge that's an area that, as we continue, again, look at continuous improvement, that has to improve.
And we all know social media, lots of bad things surrounding, and that's one of the chief things that I always hear about cell phones. It's the social media that causes problems during the school day on the cell phones. But if we're also allowing students to engage in it on school property outside of the school day, it's kind of just punting the issue to the parents then, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. And see where I was at
Just
here.
real quick.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that, but we're also limited in that. Recently the Supreme Court came out and really talked about that exact thing. And so I don't disagree with your feeling, except we do have limitations on the social media presence that we can dictate for students off of school grounds. And
Okay.
Whether we agree with that or not, that's something that legally we would be prohibited from stepping into that in terms of some of those pieces. And so that's also another factor we have. And that's why we give the tools to the parents so they can make those decisions, because just legally we don't have the right to step in some of those situations.
And I'll just add that I'm a parent that uses Securely to monitor my kids' Chromebooks in their elementary age. And we received an email when they first started that said, we use Securely, and they provided links, and we went and watched videos and read guides, and we were able to, maneuver. I'd never used Securely before. I wasn't familiar with it. And it was pretty user-friendly, and you go in and you just say what you want them to have access to and what you don't. And so I'm sure there are parents that are having problems accessing it, but the information, short of then going into the building and getting one-on-one instruction, I do think we're providing parents with access about how to use Securely. And I found once you get into it, it's actually really user-friendly. I've assigned my husband the responsibility of reviewing our Securely reports each week, which he does. And then we actually have really cool conversations with the kids, like, oh, we saw you were Googling XYZ. Tell me about that. So I like it, and I found it pretty easy to use.
It actually didn't only come out at the beginning of the year. It comes out in that weekly update. But like Director Lingo, I'm a new Securely user, as I have a kindergartner. And it goes back to Superintendent Degner's point. We could probably do more in communicating how parents access those pieces, because it's not overly apparent even to me, if I don't take a lot of time and sit down and do it. And so I think it's there, but yes, additional communication reminders to parents about how they access the tools is something we need to do. And we also need to make sure that we're providing all those details in the languages that our families speak. We had a language presentation right before this, and so there's some limitations also with third-party providers about what languages they put everything into, and so we need to make sure that we're also providing those resources across our families in multiple languages.
I've had a couple medical professionals reach out to me about issues with seeing some of the people that they see come in and the Chromebooks being used to the wee hours of the morning to play video games. Do we do any has there ever been a consideration of turning them off at a certain time?
I think my kids turn them off at a certain time.
Well, but we have parents in the district that work overnights.
I'm not sure if that's possible, actually. That might have been one of your questions, Director Lingo, but I'm not sure if we could shut all those devices down or turn off access at that point, but we could certainly check into that some more. But I did not have a question from or an answer necessarily straight from Adam on that one.
I think we'd also be concerned about that a little bit. I mean, maybe at the elementary level, but at the secondary level, we have students that are working full-time in addition to coming to school. And so I would hate to shut off their devices late at night when if they've gone and they've worked second shift and they're home at midnight, then they do homework for 1, 2, or 3 hours before they come back to school. I would hate to take that tool out of their hand. And so I know that we can differentiate between elementary and secondary, but just like there's parents at work, we have students that face some other barriers to their learning as well, that we want to make sure they have the tools available to them at the times where they can actually do their learning rather than on what we think the time is for them to do their learning.
Do we have a way of making sure that they're not going on video games, watching YouTube all night or Netflix or anything like? I understand the learning part of it because, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just wanting to make sure that what we have is being used as a tool for learning.
I think that's back to the securely, you know, and what parents would tighten down for the controls on that. I'm not sure it's as nimble enough as you'd say, hey, social media is okay until 9 p.m. and then after 9 p.m., no social media. I think they would have to say whether or not the student should have access on that device once it leaves the school district and is on different Wi-Fi. So I'm not sure it could timestamp that close enough, but I do think we have the ability for parents to restrict those different activities they can do. But it just goes back to communicating that to people know that you get the email report, but if you don't click into the email and set up some further settings, again, we're probably missing some opportunities there with families.
So anything that happens, once the Chromebook leaves the school, it's on the parents and guardians to do any kind of limitation of the Chromebook.
It's not
I'm
no
gathering-
limitations. We still have the legally required filters, you know, that would be applied. But some of the things become less lax or become more lax, about social media and some of those, but we would still filter those inappropriate things required by law.
I'll let anybody else ask any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fensterman, for your presentation. I learned a lot tonight. Just a couple of questions. I'm just curious about what it looks like in the classroom. Like, how much of the day are they on their screens? I appreciate all of the advantages and the opportunities here for enhancements and innovation. And I'm just wondering, like, how much of the day are they actually like looking at the screen? Any ideas?
I think it's gonna be really hard to pinpoint and provide an exact amount of time because every teacher has the autonomy to leverage those devices as they see fit in that instructional design process. One of the things I mentioned earlier is we can pull analytics to show what students are accessing, but we can't timestamp it. There's not a timestamp in the current infrastructure we have and the current third-party resources we leverage. We don't have the ability to narrow it to just on-site and then also narrow it by user. We have the ability, so I mentioned Clever is one of those tools. I can look at grade level and by building, but that third-party solution does not allow me to be really granular to know, like, teacher Andrew had his students on the device for 30 minutes from 8 to 9 and then 45 minutes. It doesn't get that granular. So the one thing that we can pull is based on the average amount of time per grade level. For example, if I want to look at first grade across the district, it'll show me what the top usage of applications are for students. It'll also show me what percentage across the district of all of our first graders have used those applications, and then also the average time spent on those applications. And if you look at it, if it's over 7 days, for example, or 28 days, for example, or over the entire year, that's where, like, even looking at the last 7 days, you're gonna notice that even some of the most popular resources would equate to roughly 10 minutes or less within that classroom day. So we're talking about from the start of the school day to the end of the school day. The caveat to that, again, is that because we can't differentiate between on-site versus off-site, it can be kind of skewed as to, like, it says it's less than 10 minutes, but was it actually on-site or was it off-site? So that's really just ultimately the limitation of the third-party software that's out there and that we currently have access to.
Have we given our teachers, especially our elementary teachers, any parameters or any guidelines, like recommendations of how much to use the Chromebook and the screen time during the day? Is that something that we could look into, I wonder?
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, I think part of the challenge is if you think specifically elementary, when we pivoted from remote learning back to on-site, we had some of those challenges to readdress and reacclimate to on-site learning, where kids had a lot of autonomy at home with those devices, and now we had to kind of bring those back on-site and kind of relearn and reestablish routines and procedures with those solutions. We also have to remember when we were remote learning, we had some expectations on usage with those devices in terms of some of those supplemental resources such as Dreambox and Lexia to scaffold and kind of accommodate some of those gaps that we had from learning loss that took place. And so we kind of pivoted back on site, and so we had some of those pieces. I think what we would have found is a lot of teachers went back to investing in that kind of relationship piece and reestablishing those routines and procedures, realizing like I think teachers were also in that same boat of I had to stare at my blank boxes for way too long, and I'm ready for getting back and engaging in that human element side of things. So I think it all depends on grade levels. What you'll notice with the data is that the younger grades have a lot less usage compared to our upper elementary. So when you look at kindergarten usage, it is very, very low with the minutes. In terms of what you're going to see those teachers being given guidance on is going to be oftentimes when they're doing some research projects in conjunction with collaboration with librarians. A lot of times you'll see some of that usage there from guidance there, but then also some of those supplemental resources like the happy numbers that you saw on that the data there, and also Lexia, which would be some of those resources. Beyond that, it's really kind of at their discretion where they're trying to remove some of those barriers for learners and infuse those into that instructional design process.
That's what
Director
I was
Finch,
wondering. Yeah.
I was going to say Executive Director Proctor. Executive Director
Long night.
Proctor, yeah. And I were sidebarring. I mean, to be very direct, no, we've not given them time parameters at the elementary. And I think Andrew did a nice job of describing it. I'm not sure specific time parameters would be what we would want to do, but additional ideas about how the technology can best be utilized is something we can certainly look at.
I'm just trying to get an idea, how much of their day is spent on the Chromebooks. And then
anecdotally, we would tell you not very much.
Okay,
but we don't have data to say that.
Sure.
When we go visit schools, we don't walk around elementary classrooms and see Chromebooks out on all desks. And so,
and I'm not in an elementary classroom, so that's why I'm just trying to get an idea.
Right.
Yeah.
But I want to be transparent and answer your question and say really right now I think that's why we need to do some more data collection. It's based on our observations or pulling some of this, but also want to be honest and answer your questions that no, we haven't given them hard and fast guidelines on that usage.
And then one last question. As we're polling our parents, I wonder if we could ask them if they would think that an in-person instruction on Securely would be helpful, if that is something that folks would be interested in, and if that's something that we could do, because I think that kind of in-person instruction is going to help some people who might not be able to.
And if not in person, maybe some
everybody
tutorial
learns differently,
videos
right?
we can access, right, as well, for people that can come on site.
Really intuitive. Like we were actually just in my parent app. I have both a 3rd grader and a 5th grader, and my 5th grader was on 3 sites today for a total of 4 minutes I could see, and it was all KCRG weather, trying to probably challenge our decision today on the track meet. And then my 3rd grader was on, she's advocating for herself, I suppose. Yep. And my 3rd grader was on Epic today, probably doing some research because it was like about 5 minutes. And within that app, I can pause their internet at any point in time. I can set parameters when we're at home of what time is bedtime, and it will automatically, like the internet will not connect to it at that point. So it is very intuitive. So just helping parents to understand to download that app and what they can do, I think would be something we can certainly look into.
On the issue of equity, what languages does the app support?
That's a great question. We can look into that.
I think that one's limited. I thought I was just looking through here. I think we are language limited on that. It sounds like, Eliza, you were just saying that it will turn off the internet to it, which basically turns it into a brick. I would say the other thing, and I hope my team doesn't think I'm stepping out of line here, but I know for sure at elementary, if a parent doesn't want the thing coming home, just call the school and say it doesn't come home.
Absolutely.
And so it can just stay at school. It doesn't need to come home at all. Again, once we get to secondary, that I'm sure we would still work through that request and probably take some paperwork to do that. But again, if they don't want the device to come home, it doesn't have to come home. We never wanted to believe we strong-armed anybody into having this school device because we believe it does create a different level of challenge and supervision at home. I mean, that is real. That's realistic. If you've made different decisions about when to give your kids devices, we want to respect that. For us, it would totally transform the whole idea about what we have for labs or don't have for labs now, student access just to do basic word processing skills. And so some of this all, yes, got forced to us a little bit quicker than we probably would have taken advantage of or even looked at elementary school. But I do think there's obviously some things here, as we've talked about in preparing for this presentation, talked to some of you guys about that we need to continue to communicate and work and partner with parents on at home because they are dealing with these challenges and they are struggles. And when we give a device, of course, we take great responsibility of that. over with if they've provided their child a phone and what those parameters are set up. But we would also want them to know, first of all, they're the parent and they can decide whether or not this device needs to be there. If not, it can stay at school, and they can utilize other resources or the tools they have at home to complete that work.
We did look real quick, and it supports English, Spanish, and French.
English, Spanish, and French.
I just had a quick question regarding your next steps and a timeline, especially for the short-term goals like feedback and data collection. Have we given like in-depth thought to how those would be carried out and the time frame for that?
The one I can speak to on there, we have gathered some data from teachers currently, and that data we have compiled to be able to, and that was from the tech department seeking out some input to look at what kinds of opportunities might we have to build teacher capacity. And so a lot of it was looking at the accessibility features and is there awareness among teachers for the accessibility features that are natively built into the Chromebooks is an example of some of the questions that we're asking. So from that perspective, we have started to gain some insights from teachers on how they're using the devices and what they would value in growing their own capacity to navigate a digital environment beyond that. In terms of the auditing current practice, in terms of data collection on the cost analysis, I know that our current refresh cycle would be up at the end of next school year. So the life cycle, that 4-year life cycle, Chromebooks at the end of the 24-25 school year would be up for reevaluation. I know that we're currently exploring options as the tech department is looking at from different vendors. It's my understanding that we'll have to put out an RFP. I don't really know what that stands for. That's not in my wheelhouse, but I know that provides the opportunity for people to bid and place like
request for proposal.
Yeah. There we go.
There you go.
That's what I have Google for.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, I know you said you started the feedback on utilization with some teachers, and that's just the start. Just in case any teachers are listening this far into the board meeting, there still will be opportunity for them to provide that feedback, correct?
Yeah, so that I mean, yeah, it's going to be ongoing. I think that piece that we're looking at, we're constantly always looking at ways that we can enhance things. So for example, we've standardized Canvas as an LMS platform. There's multiple layers to that exist. So like part of the vision moving forward too is to scale the use of Canvas from a professional level, from a director's level, for our coordinator level. So those coordinators are also going to be using Canvas as a centralized hub to facilitate learning with their department teachers. But in addition to that, we have a product called Canvas Catalog that serves as a storefront or a centralized hub for professional development. So part of the vision too, knowing that our teachers are, time is a precious resource, right? And so we want to provide multiple opportunities for ways in which teachers can engage in that learning. So there's lots of things that we're like trying to connect, but as much as we would like to wave the magic wand and have it materialize tomorrow, we're trying to lay down the foundation now and slowly start to scale that out. And that data collection piece was one of those essential pieces to help guide what are ways and modalities that we can leverage to build teacher capacity around instructional technology.
Great, thank you. Were there additional questions, comments from board members?
When this survey comes out, will there be surveys of parents and their opinions on the implementation of one-to-one and their opinions? Because I mean,
I think we'd want to talk about that. I mean, there's the screen time concern, but I mean, I also think there's just a careful balance. I mean, we haven't traditionally surveyed parents about instructional methods and if they approve of our instructional methods or not. We usually leave that to the educational professionals. Now, I think do they have concerns about their student screen time and how much access to screen time? I think those things, are probably more in bounds than are we looking for an evaluation of our instructional practices. That's not something that we've probably had a conversation even with the ICA about to know if they would be comfortable with some kind of a public survey going out about teacher
it's more like
behavior.
How much time do you think your child should spend on a laptop in the classroom during the day? How many days a week? Something like that. Easy.
Yeah, I mean, we could consider that. I guess I'm not hearing that as a prevalent concern. I mean, I think you're communicating that as a prevalent concern, but from the bulk amount of time a student's on the device during the instructional day, I'm not hearing that as a concern that we've heard yet from our instructional professionals or from you guys. Now, if it's outside the school day, I mean, maybe there's a way to even two-part that, right? Do you have a concern about the amount of time your student's on a device during the school day? And then the second part is, do you have a concern about the amount of time your student's on a device outside the school day, something to that effect. But I guess my caution would just be, I'm not sure we want to get into public evaluation of our instructional methods in a parent survey format. But the things about screen time, I think that's something we want to continue the conversation on. Director Williams talked about cell phones. There's probably a follow-up point we want to make with you guys about that before we go out with multiple modes of surveys, especially here over the next few months when we won't get survey results back either, so.
And I would just say that I personally would be very uncomfortable having parents chime in on instructional design. It's what Director Eastham kind of alluded to at our operational committee meeting then. I think that the experts are those who are our educators who have been devoting their lives to studying how to instruct students. And I'm just not at a point where I would want us to venture into those waters.
And I agree with that sentiment also. I think teachers and the teaching directors are the experts on teaching in this district. And I'm inclined to let them make these decisions.
All right. Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm sure we'll probably invite you back for another in-depth conversation.
You might have a game.
Yeah.
Adam picked a great day to be gone.
Yes. Next up on the agenda is the middle school construction update.
That's good. That's good.
I thought I was finished for the evening. No, so good evening. Actually, this is just kind of a preview. We're coming back to the board with our next checkpoint at the end of May. If you remember in April, we came and talked to you about what our contingency plans were at Southeast Junior High in terms of moving some modular classrooms there. We actually talked about that example in ops. And when we brought this proposal to the board in April, we did what we called, not a contingency bid, an alternate bid that would then take effect in June. And we said, again, we'd come back to you in 2 weeks. And so we just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an update. We are continuing to hear from the contractors that they feel positive about being able to create the work on time. We still believe it's in our best interest to have an alternative in place should that not happen. At this point, though, we do feel that we're not going to come to you next week asking for permission to move the entire cadre of modulars that we thought we were going to a month ago. Originally, we thought it would be about 15 or 16 mobile classrooms. We're not exactly keyed in on what that number will be in 2 weeks, but we'll believe it will be substantially less than that. We are cautiously optimistic we'll be able to use at least a portion of the new classrooms at Southeast. While we didn't talk to you about the modular project necessarily at North Central, we find ourselves in that same boat there, that we'll be able to use at least a portion of the new classrooms when the school year begins. Remember, the 10-plex is already at North Central. That's why we haven't talked about having modulars there. It's rained a lot in the last week, and so as Dwayne and Jeff continue to tell me some of these things, it just happens on a daily basis. They're still getting positive reports, but we're not doing our due diligence. We're not putting our students in the best position for success if we don't have some contingency plans in place. And so really, it wasn't meant for a large discussion tonight, but just to let you know where we are, so we didn't let a whole month pass before we came to you asking for a vote on the next steps on the modular project at Southeast. But with that, the superintendent, myself, and Jeff and Dwayne would be happy to answer any questions you have this evening.
So rain is bad at this moment? We don't want more rain?
That's what I hear, yeah.
So you anticipate at our second meeting, probably more concrete numbers and information for us regarding what will be needed?
Yes, and
Okay.
I should have, the one piece I left out is just as a reminder, if folks didn't hear our conversation, is that we can't wait until the middle of July to make
Right.
the conversation. They've got to put footings in, and then we have to get the modulars on site. They have to get wired, all the necessary steps that have to take place, and that takes a considerable amount of time. And so really our window to make a decision on the number that we have to move gets very small the further we get to in June. And actually by the middle of June, we have to have, well, probably the first week of June, really, we have to have those decisions made.
Okay.
So from what I recall, before we were looking at $1 million of cost, when you say we might have to move less, would we save money on that? I mean, then does
hope
the
they're shaking
cost,
their heads
does the
yes behind
cost
me, 'cause,
decrease with the
yes.
amount of units we have to use?
Yes,
Okay.
and we can bring you back a more concrete number.
Yeah, the one thing we haven't explained is that we are still gonna incur some costs on these modulars, because whether they have to go to Southeast, they're going to get moved out of the district somewhere. And so that's where, our contract with this provider is basically gonna move those to Southeast and then have to move them again, or we'll move some of them out of the district and some to Southeast and then have to move those others out. So, I mean, we are gonna commit some funds either way to do this. It's just probably, are we committing those additional funds to make another stop before they leave the district?
But this seems like at least a positive development, why we may not be able to avoid the mods at all costs. It seems like maybe less mods than we initially thought, and that's going to save us some money, which is good. I'm just trying to put a silver lining on it, like work with me, Chase.
I appreciate that. As we talked about, right, we want to under-promise and over-deliver. And so, yes, we're hoping for lots of sunshine and no rain, and that we have these finished by the middle of August. But if not, we want to make sure that we can get those kiddos onto those middle school campuses and get the school year started.
So Dwayne, whatever you did for that, to get that mild December, just do that same thing here for the rain.
All right. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you so much. That takes us to our action items. First up is the 800 series policy building and sites. Is there a motion?
I move that we pass the 800 series policies, buildings, and sites.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is the policy primers. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the policy primers as presented.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is our opt-out resolution for a private school security officer or a school resource officer. And for those of you listening in the audience or at a later time, this is legally required by recently passed legislation that school boards have to bring this to a vote. So this is why this is on our agenda for tonight. Is there a motion?
I move that we pass the opt-out resolution for a private school security officer or a school resource officer.
Second.
Any questions, comments?
I would like to just make the comment that I would enthusiastically will vote for this resolution. I think the legislation that even requires us to make a decision is ill-considered, ill-timed, and dangerous to students in this district.
Agreed. Any additional comments, questions? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our action items for tonight. Next up is our legislative update. Superintendent Degner, did you have?
Just two really short things. One, we're scheduled to have a meeting with the AEA tomorrow to talk a little bit about their plans for services, and they're going to continue to get some feedback from us at this time as well about what we might utilize from them with that 40% flow-through dollars that they'll continue to receive. So we'll continue to update you guys as we have more information on that. And then second, Black Voices Project spoke tonight, and part of the comment was also around the arming staff. Just a reminder to the public and community that might be listening at a later date, that would boards would have to have a policy. Districts would have to adopt a policy to do that. We do not have any plans to do that here in this district, to put forward a policy that would allow our staff to be armed, whether or not they have the qualified immunity piece. And so just to be clear on that, that's not something that we're going to put in front or recommend to the board. And I think you can see from the board's the kind of reaction there, I don't think that's anything anyone has to be concerned about. But that would have to be an opt-in. This one's an opt-out. And so just so people understand the difference, that's why we didn't have a resolution for that part of the legislation.
Can I add something to our future legislative that I'd like to have you guys put on your radar and track? You know, the Department of Ed just passed that new rule like 3 weeks ago, amending Title IX to add gender as a protected class in schools. And I know Iowa, along with some other states, has filed a lawsuit saying that they've overstepped in their rulemaking authority. But that rule is scheduled to go into effect in August. And I think that if it is a proper rule, and of course the supremacy clause applies, then I wonder if we have to relook at our policies that we instituted that we didn't want to about our bathrooms, as well as some of our students' access to sports participation, and whether or not the Department of Ed rule supersedes the state law requiring that. If it's going into effect in August, then that's going to be on our radar for the 24-25 school year.
It has been on our radar. Director Howard has been following this as our ER director. He also serves as our Title IX coordinator, and so it's been something that he's been tracking this spring. Allers, our law firm, has put out a number of client briefs, and they're holding sessions. So it's great to point out, but yes, it's something that we are trying to stay on top of.
Because I think that I'll speak for myself, but I think I've heard all of my directors, or most of them, say at some point in time that we did not want to enact the bathroom regulations that the state forced us to, along with others. And so I personally, if there's now different rulemaking out there that we have to follow that supersedes the state authority, I would be very interested in knowing if we can do that and if we can revert back to some of our prior rules and regulations around those issues.
Yep, and we can definitely ask that and take that to our council.
Yeah, and I would certainly support us doing those, following those steps that Lisa outlined.
Great, thank you. Next up is our director liaison report. Are there any items that directors would like to highlight on their reports?
Ruthine and I went to prom together. I want to highlight that.
Thank you, Director Williams.
It was a lovely evening.
It was. It was City High's prom. We worked the coat check room.
Well, no one invited me to go to the prom. I have to talk to my wife about that, I guess. I did have the chance to attend 2 great musical presentations, Singing in the Rain at City High, as well as the combined orchestra and chorus concert at City High presented in April, I think. And our music program in this district is just amazing and outstanding. Students are so talented, they practice so hard, and they are led by a great musical staff.
I'll just second that on the west side of town, having been going to my daughter's stuff in junior high, but then the combo stuff they do with the high schools. It's just, I think we take all these things. It's kind of like the Little Hawk paper and the west side. We take some of these things for granted that it really is exceptional. It's not your typical high school music program or even junior high. It's just we have some wonderful, certainly talented students and just amazing educators that guide them to get them to achieve wonderful heights.
Yes, for sure.
I'll just add to, since we have City West, I'll add for Liberty. Last month, I forgot to submit my list, but last month I took my daughter to the Little Mermaid with a friend. Got pictures with the Ariel afterwards, so it's just great to be able to have those kind of things to take your kids to really build, community. We're live next to City High, but we can go and use other resources throughout the district, and it's beautiful. Also, just one other note, I did go to the farmer's market just to have a little polling place for people to come up and talk. this past weekend. It was a good time. If anybody ever wants to come and stand on the corner there next month, I'm going to try to do it once a month throughout the farmer's market. It's a pretty good time. Good food there too. So.
Great.
I admire your interest in being at the farmer's market, Mitch, and certainly wish I could join you. I do want to make a further comment, President Malone, if you don't mind, that I went to the film screening of the film was named Real, R-E-E-L, Bad Arabs, How Hollywood Vilifies a People. It's presented by the Miriam Girls Club. I think many of other people went to as well. I just want to follow up with the comments that Vienna Quadura made earlier to us about that we probably need to put some effort into, at least in my view, into how, with the teaching staff, into how we're making, how we need to revise our teaching about Palestinian issues and Arab issues generally. And I know it sounds a little contradictory to my previous comment that I don't think parents should be involved in instructional methods, but I think parents and students are interested in making sure that we have instruction that acknowledges what's happening in the world today.
Thank you, Director Easton. Next up is School Board Recognition. So May is School Board Recognition Month. So thank you all seated at the table for your invaluable service to the community and to this district. Yay! I don't know if other people would like to make comments.
I would like to recognize that it's 8:20 at night. And school boards put in a lot of time.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you all.
Next up is agenda setting. So first is our education meeting, which will be on May 21st. It will be at the Stanley Museum of Art at 4:30, and we will get to see the mural in person. Yay, I'm excited. Looking forward to that. Then followed by the May 28th meetings. First up is policy and governance that cover 900 policies, which is the school district, community relations, and any policy updates that will be addressed. That meeting will start at 5:30. And that will be followed by our regular Board of Directors meeting. We will have an education showcase. I believe it's the one that was rescheduled, maybe, hopefully.
Possibly. We're still working on that.
With additional or standing items, the certified budget amendment, resolution, 900 series will come before us, the equity update. We will probably need to have an item on there to discuss the board vacancy that Director Clausen, Vice President Clausen shared with us tonight. And I should probably also note that we have a very short window of time to appoint people, 30 days. So our clock starts ticking tonight. So folks should pay attention to our district webpage, social media handles, because if I'm not mistaken, that process has to start rolling out tomorrow.
Do
correct,
we
Board
start
Secretary
operating?
Coleman? I'm sorry, what?
No, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, yeah, she's right. It
Yep.
starts tomorrow.
So do applications go online starting tomorrow, or?
No. Applications, I don't think, based on the window of time, I think we'll probably have to get those out on the 16th. We
First
have
thing we have to post is the notice, right, Kim?
Yeah,
And so
we have
that's
to
the first
post
step that
notice,
takes.
and
yep.
then it's, yeah. All right.
One thing that I would like to, if we're still on agenda setting, to piggyback on Director Williams during the discussion on the one-to-one, if we could get somehow find time for cell phone policy this summer.
Yeah.
I don't know when, because we're gonna be busy here.
Are we looking at June for the audit report?
I don't know exactly which meeting, Jane. I think it'll have to, I mean, it's got to be one of the June meetings. So, yeah, I'm just not sure if it's the first or second.
Anything else?
Director Clausen, when you announced, did you clearly indicate which meeting would be your last day? I just know it's important because of the timing, so I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record.
It'll be the first meeting in June, it'll be
Okay.
my last meeting.
The June 11th.
June
meeting.
11th.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Anything else? Hearing none, well, wait, before I adjourn, just a reminder to board members that we are not done. We have a few closed session and exempt sessions once we adjourn here. So
Only 3 more meetings.
only 3 more. Is there a motion
I
to
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.